The music was a distraction Dex didn't need. The house band had, by her reckoning, returned to stage for a third encore, although the sparse, disinterested crowd had done little to encourage it. But the band played on, as Dex tried hard to focus on the man sat in the booth across the bar. She hated jobs like this. Sticking a gun in someone's back and shaking them down was hardly noble, but what was? She tried to just think of the money, but something about this deal seemed off. A courier had dropped the package more than an hour ago, but the man in the booth had remained. Dex needed him to leave so she could make her move, follow him to some secluded spot and then take what she'd been paid to take. She'd done it countless times before, but the man in the corner booth sat silently as the band played on. Dex's communicator buzzed. She checked it and saw a flash of text on the screen. "Get out of there," it read. "Get out of there now." She got up and quickly headed for the exit. She was almost there when she realized the band had stopped playing, and she felt what she knew was a gun pressed into her back. Hello, and welcome to The Bad Spot, an actual play podcast in which I, Matt Risby, and I alone, am playing through Ironsworn Starforged. I hope you enjoyed the tale from the drift that opened up the episode. If you want to write something for me to read, then these are the parameters. Tales from the drift are 200 words or less and use prompts from 3 rolls on any oracles you like. If you want to roll some dice and write something inspired by the results, then please get in touch via the details on screen now. And whilst I have you, why don't you leave a like, subscribe, and click the little bell icon so you can follow along with the campaign every sorry step of the way. Last time out, Archer awoke on a research station situated on a giant raised platform in the middle of an ocean. He finds Luna safe and well, fixing up the eclipse, and the 2 researchers and the droid that they had encountered on the Deep Space Research Outpost are also present, trying to figure out what had happened to the people who used to crew this station. It was revealed that they had lost contact with the station as the biofuel they had been testing in deep space had turned hostile and began to destroy the outpost. On their return with Archer and Luna, they found everyone missing, but their personal transponders suggesting they are all at a sister station located on a glacial sheet of ice some distance away. It appears that the glacial sheet is beginning to break up with huge icebergs drifting mysteriously by the station. The researchers, Santos and Keelan, ask Archer and Luna to investigate, as the eclipse appears to be the only mode of transport available. Archer agrees to do so, but as they are resupplying in preparation, it is discovered that the original sample of the hostile biomass known as the Mother is missing from a containment unit. Keelan reveals that the containment unit is inaccessible to most people on the station, and it wasn't just missing, it must have been taken. So, whilst this is all very mysterious, Archer and Luna really need to get moving. But they have kind of found themselves embroiled in this situation now. And it wasn't really a debate as to whether or not they would help out the researchers. This is absolutely the right thing to do. The researchers have given them safe harbor and allowed Archer in particular to heal up and fix the ship and resupply. So this is only right. And if this is only right, then the only right thing to do in this situation is that we swear an iron vow to help Santos and Keelan out. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to name this vow, and we'll keep it very simple. It's just going to be find the missing researchers. And how hard are we going to make it? Well, the weird thing is we know where they are. We have their location through the transponders. So, winding back a little, we actually know precisely where the transponders are, which is the information we have. And also, we've got our own problems that we need to deal with in the story. And if we are going to help, we need to get to the bottom of this very quickly so we can do it and get out of here. So I'm going to say that because we know where we're going, we have the transponder, and we're in a hurry, let's just make this troublesome. So we're going to swear an iron vow to see this done, so we are rolling plus heart. That is a strong hit. On a strong hit, we are emboldened, and it is clear what we must do next. Take 2 momentum. Some momentum. It's certainly been a while since we've had some of that, so we are up to 4. And that is comparatively dizzying heights compared to where we have been recently. I think it's been maybe like 3 episodes since we've been above 5, so this is somewhat unfamiliar territory. It certainly feels that way anyway. So, okay, what does this look like? What does this Iron Vow swearing look like? I think Archer is sitting in the pilot's seat, and Luna is kind of getting the last few bits and pieces together, kind of making some checks and so on and so forth. Griff is predictably snoozing in his charging station, and Archer is holding the Professor's black iron compass in his hand. And he feels good. And when I say good, I mean he feels better than he has in quite a while. He is focused. His head is clear. And I think that the events of like the previous weeks are starting to feel less like this blurred jumble of near-death experiences that he has barely scraped through. And I think it feels to him like he has started to kind of process it all and kind of figure out what it might mean or where his place in it all is. And for the first time in a while, he feels rested and refreshed and also determined. His path is clear. He has Luna alongside him, and he knows what they have to do and what it could mean. And this is, kind of referring to their ongoing vow to intercept this or find this mystic superweapon before the clans do. But first, before they can do any of this, they must help find these researchers. Santos and Keelan have shown them real kindness, and in this unforgiving galaxy, that means a lot. This is the least that Archer and Luna can do. So with all this in mind, Archer clasps the compass in his palm, closes his eyes, and swears the vow. But before we set off, I need an answer for a question that I've been thinking about for the last 4 or 5 minutes, which is, should one of the researchers come with us? Like, do they actually need to? Does it make sense for one of them to come with us? Because presumably they know their way around the sister station, and they know their way to the sister station, and they might have, I don't know, some more specialized knowledge scientifically as to what to do with this mother sample when we find that, or if we find it. I think it kind of does make sense thinking about it that one of them would come with us. So I think I'm going to say that Keelan is going to come with us. They're kind of like the fitter of the 2 researchers, so I think it makes sense that they would have probably volunteered for what could be dangerous or arduous search in what might be kind of like harsh conditions. So we have Keelan in tow, and they're sat at one of the consoles with their transponder in their hand, and maybe they've got some other equipment like a bag of bits and bobs, some science stuff, science stuff. So the next question that we need to answer before we set off is, should this move be undertaking an expedition or setting a course? There's a pretty big difference between the 2 moves. Undertaking an expedition is usually for when you don't know where you're going, when you are trailblazing through unknown or uncharted space. Whereas setting a course is for when you follow a known route. Now, Archer doesn't know where he's going. He's never been to any of these places before. But Keelan kind of does. We can assume that they've been to the station before. Plus, we have the transponder signal we are following, even though none of us really know what awaits us there or how we're going to get there. But I think that it's probably fairer to say it's set a course, I think. I think that's the move we're going to make. So, setting a course. When you follow a known route through perilous space or across hazardous terrain or within a mysterious site, roll plus supply. Well, lucky we resupplied. So yeah, cool, let's do that. Setting a course, rolling plus supply. Okay, that is a weak hit. So our options on a weak hit are to either make some suffer moves, and that can be any 2 suffer moves or 1 suffer move twice, or we can face a complication. Now, we've just spent a whole episode getting our health and supply tracks back on track. So I'm kind of loath to undo a lot of that if we don't have to. So I guess what we'll do is we will face a good old-fashioned complication instead. So let's envision this. The Eclipse pulls up off the platform, and the endless rain is swirling round the ship as it rises up into this drab grey sky. An archer has some coordinates he's been given punched into the console, and they set off. And visibility is nearly 0. It is just endless, thick, grey sheets of rain. But they have little option but to just put their faith in the coordinates and in the signals given off by the transponders. And it's tense. It is tense heading forward into the gloom, almost kind of blindly, not being able to see more than maybe a dozen meters in front of the cockpit. And it is like this for more than an hour, let's say. Just relentless, silent slog through the rain. And then the weather starts to break, starts to change. And the rain hitting the cockpit screen becomes sludgy before the greyness lightens to white and the visibility improves as the persistent rain gives way to snow. And Archer is relieved to be finally able to see further now, and both Luna and Keelan join him in the cockpit, kind of looking out as see what they can see. And through the breaks in the snow, they see a huge glacier rising up about 40 or 50 meters above sea level. An Archer kind of slowly pulls back on the yoke, and the Eclipse climbs. And they rise above the glacier, and it levels out below them, stretching out as far as the eye can see. This endless expanse of blue and white ice. And Keelan says, "This is it. We're close." And it certainly doesn't feel that way to Archer. There's nothing to see at all, just ice and more ice. But he kind of slows the ship, allowing them all kind of like a chance to better be able to see something should it suddenly become visible. And Keelan is scanning the landscape. Transponder in their hand is showing the yellow grid, showing the distance closing between them and the giant mass of signals up ahead. Archer, Luna, and Keelan all watch as the Eclipse slowly moves to within what the device says is about 20 or so meters of the signal. And Keelan says, "Set us down there." And Keelan is pointing off to the right, and Archer kind of strains to see it. But there's like this barely visible outline of this hexagonal landing pad, and it's ringed by these little pinky white lights that are struggling to cut through the snow, but he can see it. And Archer lowers the Eclipse's landing gear, which crunch through the ice below as they touch down on the pad. So I think the first thing we're going to do here is we are going to mark progress. And whilst this wasn't an expedition, we have completed a journey to where we're supposed to be. So I think that counts as reaching a milestone. So let's mark progress. And this is ranked as troublesome, so we'll be marking 3 boxes each time we mark progress. So find the missing researchers, 3 out of 10. But we did roll that weak hit for setting a course. So we're going to face a complication on arrival. So what is that going to be? Now, there's a few oracles that we can roll on for this, but I'm kind of feeling like rolling on the story complication oracle, because that is always good value, and I don't feel like we've rolled on it for quite a while. So let's ask the oracle, what could our complication be? 72. 72 is trusted information is shown to be false. Okay. So let's think about that. What information are we trusting? What information do we have that we are trusting? I mean, there's the transponders. That's one piece of information. And I guess the other bit of information that we're trusting is the location of the sister station. That's all the information we really have. And I don't want to go down the route of the researchers betraying us deliberately. I think that is just about as boring a plot development as I can think of. So I think those two are our only options, the transponder's location or the location of the station. One of those bits of information is false. So I think to give us a little bit of an extra push, let's maybe ask the Oracle again for some guidance about how this falsehood presents itself. And what we'll do is we're going to roll on one of the core oracles. And I'm going to give you a little peek behind the curtain here of how I do this. There are 4 core oracles, which are action, theme, descriptor, and focus. And all 4 of these oracles, they just generate a prompt in the form of one word. And whenever I'm looking for a prompt, what I tend to do is I roll the dice and I check the result against whatever oracle is lying on the top of the pile. And if that's not interesting, I will just check that same number against the next oracle in the pile, and so on and so on. So I typically only roll once for these prompts and then shuffle the oracles until I find something I like. So that's exactly what I'm going to do now, but through the magic of editing, you won't even know it. So let's ask the oracle for a prompt to help us interpret what this falsehood could possibly be. 36 is grave. Okay, so this is becoming a little clearer. Now, grave can be a noun, and grave can also be an adjective. But either way, it's not particularly good, I don't think. So let's put this together. Okay, so the ramp descends from the hold of the Eclipse. An archer who is wrapped in his heavy blue parka, with his eyes shielded by goggles and face wrapped in a scarf, walks carefully out onto the ice. And there's this thick layer of crisp snow that crunches underfoot. And he's followed by Luna and Keelan, both of whom are kind of dressed similarly. And the wind howls and the snow is steady, but it's important to say here that conditions are by no means treacherous. It's just snowing and it's windy. And Keelan steps ahead, eyes fixed on the transponder. And it doesn't make any sense. They are all stood right in amongst the signals. And Keelan pulls back their hood and lifts the goggles from their eyes. And they point off into the distance. Archer squints to see what they're pointing at, and he can kind of vaguely make out the shape of a building in the distance through the snow. So this must be it. And Keelan begins to run towards it excitedly. And Archer and Luna start to give chase, but after a few steps, Luna stops. Something has caught her eye, and she stands still, looking down at the ice. And Archer joins her, and now he sees it too. And then the full scope of the horror in which they find themselves dawns on them. Keelan turns to see them stopped some way back and is about to call out at them, but then they see what Archer and Luna have seen. There are bodies in the ice. They are surrounded by bodies, covered in a thin layer of ice and snow where they lay. It's certainly not obvious at first look, but now in every single direction there are bodies. Archer can see Keelan drop to their knees, hands clamped over their face, and Luna stoops down next to where a frozen hand is protruding from the ice, and she carefully brushes back this top layer of snow to reveal the sleeve of a blue parka, much like the one she's wearing, one that bears the interlocking square logo of Mahari Station. She looks up at Archer, who is looking out at Keelan, who is frantically trying to free a body from the ice. And both Archer and Luna move quickly over to Keelan, whose face is reddened by both the bite of the frozen wind and by the tears that are streaming down their face. And they are kind of frantically, furiously scraping away the snow and ice around the legs of this poor, unfortunate soul trapped in the ice nearest them. And Keelan is starting to hyperventilate, to panic. And they see another body, and they leave the one they're digging and move on to that, and once again start kind of clawing away at the ice, and then they move on to another, and then another, and there's just so many. And Luna slowly moves over and drops to her knees beside Keelan. She takes their face in her hands and looks them in the eye. And she says calmly, softly, "Hey, look at me. Look at me. I'm sorry. There's nothing you can do for them. They're gone. They're gone. I'm sorry." And Keelan nods through the tears that they understand. And then Luna pulls them in for a tearful, sobbing hug. And she looks up at Archer, and he's scanning the area. He's kind of trying to kind of roughly estimate how many bodies there might be. He reckons this could easily be like 100 plus bodies. So this very well could be everyone who is missing. He picks up the transponder that Keelan had dropped, and there are no other signals coming from anywhere nearby. There's just the one solitary yellow dot that is Santos back at the platform. And I think that what I want Archer to do here is some detective work and try and ascertain some details about this awful, macabre scene. So I think the best way of doing that is probably the move gather information. So that move triggers when we are searching for clues and analysing evidence, and that is exactly what's happening here. We're trying to figure out what possibly could have happened. So we're going to be doing that by rolling plus wits. Okay, that is a weak hit. So, weak hit says the information provides new insight, but also complicates your quest. Envision what you discover and take +1 momentum. So, up to 5 momentum now. What information could we discover here that complicates our quest? I think the first thing that Archer would do is kind of partly uncover one of the bodies and see if he could ascertain if there's any obvious cause of death. And I think that's what he does to one, maybe two bodies. And I think that on both bodies, Archer can't find any obvious trauma or apparent sign of foul play. So I think Archer, who is, I will state this now, by no means a forensic pathologist, I think he suspects, by his best guess, he suspects that these poor researchers probably succumbed to hypothermia. They froze to death out here. But why? Why weren't they in the station? Why were they out here on the ice? So he walks towards the station in the distance, which starts to kind of come into focus and become clearer as he nears. It seems very basic, much like the prefabricated architecture of the buildings that were on the platform. It's kind of boxy. It has these thick, probably like heavily insulated walls and this heavy double door. And it's just a single story building with a large communications dish on its flat roof. And the immediate thing that strikes Archer about this is that this building, if this is in fact the full extent of the entire sister station, this building is very, very small. It is the size of probably just one of the bigger labs back on the platform. There is no way at all that this could house more than a couple of dozen people at most. Maybe you could probably cram 50 in if they were all standing, but no way at all could it fit more than 100 people in it. So something is up here. Something is off. And Archer turns back and he can see the outline of the eclipse, which is now in the distance. And there's Luna comforting Keelan between Archer and the ship. And all around them, bodies. The closer he gets to the building, the more bodies there seems to be. And that's when he finally sees the damage to the building. And as he moves around the sister station from the front, he can see that almost the entire rear of the structure is gone, is completely missing. And it's only really the front wall, part of the roof, and side walls that still stand. The rest has been blown away, and what remains is scorched with the heat of what appears to have been a blast or an explosion of some kind. And I think that as he's looking, as he's kind of moving around the sister station, he also notices that he is standing very precariously on the edge of a huge, sharp, sheer drop. The ice, just a matter of meters away, gives way very sharply into a huge crevasse that has opened up in the ice beneath his feet. And he kind of didn't realize that he was just one step away from a long fall to a quick death into the abyss below. As he expects the damage, he's kind of surveying the scene. You can see him kind of almost trying to math it out. He's stood there kind of pondering the angles and kind of looking at the blast damage, and Archer theorizes that at his best guess, he thinks the blast came from above. And if it did, then it could have conceivably caused the damage to both the building and also caused sufficient damage to the ice to open up this huge crevasse. He then hypothesizes that there's no telling if that damage could have caused a huge chunk to break off the ice somewhere else. And there's every chance that the roaming icebergs that have been drifting back towards the platform, like the one we saw earlier that narrowly missed, could have been caused by this very blast, this very damage. I think that's quite a bit of information we've discovered. And whether that actually tells us anything or not remains to be seen. So, to summarise, We have found the researchers, who appear to have all frozen to death outside a station they could never have all been housed in the first place, having been brought out here for Lord knows what reason. The sister station where they have been brought has also been partially destroyed by what looks like an explosion that has, in Archer's opinion, also caused a huge crevasse to open in the ice. So what does this mean? And I personally have no idea, but I think that figuring this out definitely counts as progress. If we take a look at what constitutes reaching a milestone, then it says gaining valuable insight definitely counts as progress. So I think this is very valuable insight. So in that case, we will definitely mark progress here. So find the missing researchers, going to mark 3 more progress. So that's up to 6 out of 10. And the iron vow we swore was just to find the researchers, and we unequivocally have. We found them. They are all dead, but we have found them. So what I'm thinking is, can we just try and roll to fulfill this vow now? Or is narratively there any more to discover? Rolling against 6 progress is risky. Risky is my middle name. It is not my middle name, but it is very nearly my surname. So I think on that basis alone, we should do it. So let's not hang around. We need to move on. So what we're going to do is we're going to try and fulfill our vow against only 6 progress. So cross those fingers, everybody. That is a weak hit. We very nearly got away with that. So let's have a look at what a weak hit says on fulfill your vow. So, okay, this looks a little complicated, but it says the vow is fulfilled and we get to mark progress on our legacy track. But because it's a weak hit, there is more to be done, or we realise the true nature of our quest. We can either swear an iron vow to set things right and take the full legacy reward, or we can make the reward 1 lower. Now, personally, I don't want to be swearing iron vows on top of iron vows, so let's not get caught up in an iron vow spiral. So, instead, what we're going to do is we are going to realise the true nature of our quest. And in terms of the legacy tracks, in this instance, we would have only marked 1 tick because the rank is formidable, but because we aren't swearing another vow to set it right, we reduce the number of ticks we mark by 1. So that actually means we don't mark any after all that. So we got nothing out of it. And in addition, we're about to realise the true nature of our quest. Now, if it wasn't to find the researchers, what could the true nature of our quest possibly be? Well, if any of you listened to the top tips for playing Ironsworn video I did with Steve Morrison of the Errant Adventures podcast, that's an excellent show, by the way, check that out, link below, then you will have seen that one of my top tips is something I call join the dots. Now, what that means is that without forcing it, without crowbarring or shoehorning it, you should, wherever possible, try to connect the threads of your story, even if they don't seem to be connected at first, even remotely. Now, I must confess here that I have been actually slightly worried about the diversion that our story has taken. And I did actually consider, after doing the episode last week, before I released it, actually not releasing it and trying to get the story back on track and recording a whole other one. And I'm kind of glad we didn't, but here we are. And the reason that I felt anxious about that was because we seemed to leave Paxton Hold and the Iron Gates and the conflict between the clans a long time ago. And from the point of Archer swearing the vow to stop the clans getting hold of the Mystic superweapon, the story has actually seemed pretty focused and pretty tight. It's got this clear direction and a real narrative thrust. But mechanically in the game, we were in bad shape and we needed to look for somewhere to keep our noses clean and stay out of trouble for what I thought would be an episode. I did not intend for us to become entangled in this strange mystery of the disappearing researchers and this weird stolen moss, as compelling as it has been. So, we're here now, and what I'm going to try and do is join the dots to take what seems to have been a segue into something else entirely and tie it into the main story. And I think I figured out how I'm going to do that. So just bear with me. Okay. So Archer is still kind of figuring this scene out. He's stood in the snow and he's turning it all over in his head. He's trying to kind of put the pieces of the puzzle together. And after a moment, he is joined by Luna and Keelan. And Luna says, "What happened here?" And that's when Luna notices the blast damage on the building. And Archer stoops down next to one of the bodies nearest the building and kind of brushes away some of the snow and kind of reveals that the clothing is kind of torn and scorched. And Archer says, "I guess most were killed in the blast. I think the others froze to death." And he's kind of super wary of Keelan. They probably knew all of these people. And this must be like incredibly distressing for them. And Archer continues, "But why were they all out here? How did they even get out here?" And then he calls over, "Keelan, how would you access the station?" And Keelan, is kind of still kind of face reddened with tears, says, "There's a shuttle. Would have taken them a couple of trips to get everyone here, but that's how." And Luna is slowly moving between the bodies on the ground and kind of inspecting the damage, looking into the crevasse. She's trying to put things together herself. And Archer says to Keelan, "And you lost contact with the platform just after the biofuel experiment went wrong. You said you lost control of it?" "That's correct." And Archer continues, "So you called back and told them what was starting to happen?" And Keelan nods. "And then you never heard from them again?" And Keelan nods again. "And someone has taken the mother, the original biofuel sample?" And Keelan is kind of trying and failing to see what Archer is getting at. And Archer is now starting to pace. And he stops for a second and then slowly walks over to a body that doesn't look like the others. It looks out of place. It looks different. It's lying face down in the snow. It's bulkier, not wearing the blue parka or a jumpsuit that every other body is. And using his foot and no little effort, he rolls the body over to reveal a figure wearing heavy tactical armor. Armor that is embossed with a familiar pattern. A pattern of rose gold thorns. And he stares at it for a moment, and the pieces are starting to fall into place. And he says to Keelan, "I don't think you were testing biofuel up there." Keelan still looks confused. And Archer says, "I think you were testing a bioweapon." And Archer looks down at the dead Clanthorn Bannersworn and says, "And it may have just fallen into the wrong hands." And then that's when something clicks in Keelan's head. You can see the scientists' brains starting to put it together, and they say, "Oh God." And it's almost as if Keelan has suddenly realised the devastating potential of that bioweapon. It consumed their entire station in a matter of days. It's a miracle that they managed to survive out there as long as they did, and Archer and Luna just happened to stumble across them. They could not stop its growth. What that organism could do in a more targeted way is a horrifying thought. And that's when Luna calls out from around the other side of the station. Archer! And Archer and Keelan quickly move round to find Luna squatting next to another body in the snow. A body she has herself turned over, face up. As Archer and Keelan approach, they see that this one is also unlike the others. And this one would have been very easy to miss, as it is clothed head to toe in a distinctive white outfit. A very specific white outfit, seemingly designed for these exact environmental conditions. And Luna says, "My history is a little rusty. How many founder clans are there?" And Archer shakes his head, but Keelan says, "There are 5. And Luna reaches down to the body and brushes some snow away from a small plate metal badge on the uniform, to reveal a badge that's embossed with a stylized emblem depicting a dagger wreathed in flame. And Luna says, "Well, looks like someone else just entered the arms race." And they all just kind of like let that information sit with them for a moment before Keelan finally breaks the silence and says, "So we were working on a weapon all along, and someone sold it to the clans?" And Luna nods. Keelan continues, "And what, you think these were the highest bidders? This was supposed to be the exchange and it all went wrong? There was an ambush maybe?" And Luna says, "Maybe. Or maybe the whole thing was a setup, a double cross." And Keelan says, "Who would double cross the clans?" And that's when Archer says, "I know just the person." Thank you a million times. Thank you for watching. Please like this video, subscribe if you have not done so already, and click that little bell icon so you can be notified when the next episode drops. I'll be back next week, but until then, it is farewell and safe